Welcome to the Everyday Warriors podcast, the perfect space to speak my truth and dive into deep conversations with others. This podcast is about celebrating everyday warriors, the people who face life's challenges head on, breaking through obstacles to build resilience, strength, and courage. Join me, your host, Trudy Marie, as I sit down with inspiring individuals who have fought their own battles and emerged stronger, sharing raw, real, and authentic stories in a safe space, allowing you to explore, question, and find your own path to new possibilities. Let us all embrace the warrior within and realize that while no one is walking in your shoes, others are on this same path, journeying through life together. Please note that the following podcast may contain discussions or topics that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. I aim to provide informative and supportive content, but understand that certain things may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in need of support while listening, I encourage you to pause the podcast and take a break. Remember that it is okay to prioritize your well-being and seek assistance from trained professionals. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is the first brave step to healing. If you require immediate support, please consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or a crisis intervention service in your area. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself as you engage with the content of this podcast. Love the Everyday Warriors podcast? It would mean the world to me if you were to leave a 5-star review to ensure that the Everyday Warriors podcast is heard by more listeners around the world. You can also support the show for as little as $5 with a one-time donation or by becoming a monthly subscriber. Your contribution helps me to continue bringing you inspiring stories of everyday warriors who overcome challenges to find strength, resilience, and new possibilities in life. Head to the link to buy me a coffee and fuel the next episode. Every bit counts. If you're looking for an inspiring story of resilience, healing, and rediscovering yourself, then my book, Everyday Warrior From Frontline to Freedom, is for you. It is my memoir of hiking the 1,000-kilometre Bibbulmun Track, a journey that was as much about finding my way back to myself as it was about conquering the trail, through the highs and lows and everything in between. This book is taken from my journals and is my raw and honest experience of overcoming trauma and embracing the strength within. Grab your copy now. Just head to the link in the show notes and let's take this journey together. Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Warriors podcast. And today I have a local guest. And when I say local, she's from a fellow West Aussie just like me. So I met Em through social media, as we all do. And it's nice to finally, e-meet over Zoom. So welcome, Em.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat about all the things.
Yes, me too. I'm glad we've finally got the chance to do this. So I want to start your story by taking you back a few years ago now to 2022 when you had a pivotal life-changing moment.
Yeah, so 2022, very interesting year. I think we were all kind of starting to come out of the COVID era and there was a lot of anxiety. And in that time, so many people started getting onto TikTok, onto Instagram and talking about ADHD. And of course, I went down that rabbit hole curious, as I think a lot of people did, and was diagnosed with ADHD in September of 2022. So that's 2.5 years ago now. And it was pivotal for me because I was, how old was I? 35 at the time. And being 35 and realizing that for 35 years of your life, you'd been misdiagnosed. So I was diagnosed with anger issues, anxiety, depression. I wasn't diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder because that wasn't a thing back then, but my parents were basically told that I wouldn't do what I was told to do. And realizing so much of my trauma that I experienced was through a lens that I wasn't even aware of, completely shifted my entire life perspective. I had to go through a bit of a grieving process because I realized that there were strategies I could have been learning that could have helped me that I didn't have access to. And I guess starting there is kind of starting at the end, but the opportunity to go back and reflect and go, okay, so what could have been different? How did I even cope? Like that's a big question. It's like, how did I even cope not knowing this? On top of that, having, childhood trauma as well. And then looking at what that means for me from here on out and what I can do about it. Because I think that's one of the hardest things about learning something so big about yourself that you didn't actually understand or know is that you realize the strategies you had weren't working for a reason, not because there was something wrong with you. Because I always thought there was just something wrong with me. And I just had to force, like it was a constant force of pushing my way through. So should I take you back even further from there, like all the way back to the beginning?
Yeah, I'd love for you to go back to your childhood and how that started, but I just want to mention something about what you just said is that moment where you feel like all your life there has been something wrong with you. And
Mhm.
when people understand that no, there are circumstances essentially beyond our control that make us who we are, and things that we've had to go through that make us who we are, that there is nothing wrong with us. We're not broken. We don't need fixing. We just need to remember how to operate in our own circumstances to the best of our ability. So, obviously, getting that diagnosis and being able to understand yourself like here and now. But yeah, what was it like for you going back to being a child? And what sort of issues were going on then that you can now reflect and go, aha, that's why?
Yeah. And it goes all the way back to being basically 5 years old, my earliest memories, when I had to go and see a counselor for anger management because I would hit people, my parents, I would punch holes in walls as a 5-year-old. And as a mum now who has two young girls, thinking of a kid with that much anger and behaving in that way, it is heartbreaking, right? And you can see why it would have been heartbreaking for my parents. However, I think at the time, because they had separated when I was only 18 months old, my mum, also now diagnosed with ADHD autism, she did not cope as a single mum. So I then went and lived with my dad. So I was moving between houses and they were both young. They both really were not prepared to be parents. They made mistakes and it really was not a great thriving environment for me to be growing up in anyway. So understandably, the counsellor is going to go, okay, well, your parents are separated, especially, you go back to the late 80s, early 90s. If your parents are separated, well, that's the problem, right? And so they just were like, well, she's just angry because of her life circumstance. Understandable too. Like, of course, that had an impact on me. But as I got through schooling, it became really apparent that if I wasn't interested in something, or if someone told me what to do, I would respond differently to the way other people would. I found it really hard to focus on things that were not of interest to me. And then I thought there was something wrong with me because other people were able to do it and I wasn't able to do it. I always considered myself a little bit weird, a little bit sporadic. I had sleep issues from a very, very young age. I still generally have a few sleep issues, but I've had to work very, very hard at that. And it led me down not a great path when I was in my teens, sleeping around with a lot of guys. Like that was one of the ways that I guess maybe it was dopamine driven, or it was searching for something outside of myself because I didn't feel hole in myself. And I was searching for love, because we have this rejection dysphoria of like, oh, people don't like me unless I do X, Y, Z. And I just thought that I was a terrible person. Like, I had boyfriends and I cheated on all of my boyfriends. I was doing drugs and drinking alcohol and, all of these things that in hindsight, I just think, oh my gosh, I have two daughters. What is coming for me? They've had a very different life experience to me, but I wanted to better understand them too. And my eldest daughter also has ADHD, and being able to talk to her about it and about how she can cope with it. Well, I was just told to think more positively, and I was told to calm down, and I was told that that's not how we do things. And all of those kind of stories that were projected onto me about how we should and shouldn't behave just made me so much more resentful against the world. And it made my life, I guess, very difficult. And I didn't realize how difficult life was until I started to unravel understanding about how to manage my own mental health, and then unravel the understanding of ADHD. Because originally it was anxiety and depression that I was diagnosed with, and I was medicated for that. And I did so much personal development. Like, I did everything from, meditation. Before I had kids, it was like I got these Holy Sync CDs. They're like an hour-long meditations to listen to, and I'd plug it into my computer, and as if I have an hour to meditate now. No way. How I even managed to do that, I don't even know. Journaling, I started exercising. That is still a huge part of my mental health strategy. And just all of the personal development things that I could get a grip on to be like, okay, how can I make myself better? So I'm really glad I went down that path, because it could have been a very, very different path. But when I wrote my book, Uncertain to Unstoppable, the year before I was diagnosed with ADHD, it was all about strategies for anxiety. And the irony is, the anxiety existed because I had untreated ADHD. And when I say treated or untreated, I don't just mean medication, because it's not just about medication. Medication is a tool. But so much of what I learned about managing anxiety is the opposite of what someone with ADHD needs to do. And so I was like banging my head against this brick wall for over a decade, once I'd started in my 20s to go, right, how can I improve myself? And that, was an awful path to be on, feeling like I'm doing the work, so why am I getting better? What is wrong with me? It just further confirmed there's something wrong with me every time that it didn't work. And yet somehow I managed to, still build success, as a lot of high functioning ADHDers or, anxious people would be able to do. You still function and you still make success and you still make it happen. And those skills have been amazing. But once I was diagnosed with ADHD and started to look at things like my nervous system, executive function, better understanding how the chemicals in my body respond and how they're up and down all the time, how I can kind of make them a little bit more streamlined and consistent through, like, your breath is one thing. Medication can absolutely help, but there's so many other things that can help that I wasn't really tapping into before I knew that it was ADHD. And the irony is, I no longer have anxiety medication, which I had to have for over 10 years, maybe even more than 15 years. I've lost track. And I do take stimulants. I take Ritalin, and yet I sleep better than I ever did, which is so funny to me, because I was nervous about taking some kind of stimulant, thinking like that, surely that's going to make my insomnia worse, which is one of the most horrific things about anxiety, was just not sleeping. And yet now I sleep really well, and I don't have the anxiety medication, but I take stimulants, and here I am sleeping at night. It blows my mind how much of a shift. And I'm like, man, that would have made my life so much easier when I had little kids, when they were babies, because I wasn't sleeping anyway. And then they would wake me up once I got to sleep. So, like, oh my gosh, but all we can do is move forward,
100%. And there is so much to unpack in what you just said. And I want to go back even to the very beginning, like you said, that you came from a split family, and that was the counselor or whoever you saw back then, that was their first go-to. It's like, you've come from a split family, that's the issues you're having. Now, that's hard enough for any child. As a parent who was a single parent, like with a split family, and I saw how hard it was for my children to adapt, and they're what you would consider normal children. So having this thing go on that you were undiagnosed with and having to deal with that. One of the things I understand about people with ADHD is that there needs to be a certain amount of stability. And you saying that you had to go from your mum's house to your dad's house and back again, that there was no stability for you to even kind of deal with this type of behavior of what was going on mentally. So tell us a little bit more about what that was like for you actually as a child, having to deal with all this anxiety and pressure coming from all directions.
Yeah, and that's exactly why in my book it's called Uncertain to Unstoppable, because that instability created so much uncertainty in my life, which understandably is going to lead to anxiety. But the stability, I mean, stability is important for anyone, but you're right that, with ADHD, if you take away stability, there's a lot of fear under that. And like, I know that with my eldest daughter, we have to pre-frame things before they change so that for example, one of the times that there was a swap over of where I was living was so random. I wasn't prepared for it at all. I hadn't eaten my vegetables one night, and my dad just packed up my stuff and said, "You're going to live with your mum." And she was a 4-hour drive away, so we didn't get there until 10 o'clock at night. He knocked on the door, and didn't wait for my mum to answer the door, just drove off. And that was when I was 5. And that is a pivotal, I guess, traumatic moment for me, because in that point in time, I felt like I wasn't good enough for my dad, that I wasn't loved. It sent me on a bit of a weird trajectory with vegetables as well, because I really actually struggled to eat after that, because I had fear around food, because that event was triggered by food. And so I really struggled with eating vegetables from that point on, because even though it kind of was the opposite, because he was like, "You didn't eat your vegetables, so we're taking you to live with your mum." My mum's face when she opened the door, because she had no idea that I was coming and that I was just going to be there on her doorstep, was like it wasn't an accepting face. It was like a what the fuck kind of face, And so the stories I made in that moment about myself and about life were huge. And I've done a lot of work on that exact moment. And I can now look at that as a gift and go, you know what? That moment was shit for a 5-year-old. Like, full stop, it was shit. But no matter how much healing I do, I still go back to that event and I think, well, what it taught me was so much about perception. Because when I think about my dad's perception in that moment, what I didn't realize was there was this custody battle going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. And they had that day received a letter from my mum's lawyer. And basically, my dad wasn't going to be able to fight it. He couldn't afford to. Of course, I didn't know any of this at the time, right? So, and then there was stuff going on with my mum. Like, there was all of these things happening outside of me that I wasn't aware of. So as a child, I made these decisions without knowing the full picture. Because of course, I was a child, they weren't going to tell me all of those things. But there was a lack of communication. And so I now better understand everyone's story. I have got a capability now to go, okay, this is what we're seeing, but what else is there? And it's not just 2 sides to a story either. Like, there's that saying, there's 3 sides to a story, this one, that one, and the truth. There's even more than that. There's so much perception that goes into events, and there's also lies that we tell ourselves that become our memories that aren't actually true. So there's certain things that I thought happened, but now I'm like, I talk to people around at that time, I'm like, I have no idea what happened. Like, this is my memory, but I also know that my memory lies to me to help me, give me evidence for things that I think are correct to make me feel better. And I spent probably from the age, I think it was about 10 to 25, where I didn't talk to my dad at all. And it was because of some of the things I'd told myself about him. And, he made mistakes and he did some things that maybe weren't conducive to the love that I needed. But I got to a point where I realized maybe I haven't heard his version of events. And then when I did hear his version of events, it was completely different to the version of events that I had in my head. And I'm like, but how is that possible? And I'm like, well, I made up my own version. My mum told me her version. Now I'm hearing his version. And I don't know if any of us are ever going to know the real version of events from that long ago. But the reality is, we all have a choice at this point, right? We can go, okay, well, you hurt me. So fuck you. I'm never speaking to you again, which is what I did do for a long time. Or we can go, all right, can we draw a line in the sand and set some boundaries and move forward and use this as an opportunity to understand that everyone has different perspectives of everything. But at the end of the day, what we all want is the same thing. We all want connection. We all want love. We all want to be able to look forward to things in life, not be dragged back into the past. And so it really, even though, and I feel like I've not actually even answered your question about what it was like, I think what I told myself it was like was I just put a wall up when I was 5. I put a wall up and that wall went up for a very long time. But I couldn't deal with things very well because of that wall. And it took a very long time to bring that wall down and to then learn to deal with things because I built that wall up so bloody strong.
Look, I think you have answered it in the way that you needed to answer it, to give us an example of what life was like for you at the time. And as you said, you put a wall up. But when I think then to what you said about your teenage years and probably early adulthood, where there was the promiscuity and there was the looking for love and looking for reassurance and stuff, it comes as no surprise to probably a lot of people, given that you had this rejection from your dad, which you were now looking for. And for any child who has to deal with that kind of thing, and I think we've all had issues with our parents at some stage and can process that information in the way we know how to. But when you've already got this undiagnosed issue happening as well alongside it, you don't have that mental capacity, one, as a youth, but two, with what was going on mentally for you, that your coping mechanism was to go searching for what you didn't have at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one coping mechanism. I was also numbing pain through other, through alcohol, etc. And so they were all coping mechanisms that in my group of friends were socially acceptable. So therefore, that's what I did. And at that point in time in your life where, you don't have your prefrontal cortex developed to know that there are potential consequences to such actions, it was almost too easy to follow that kind of route. Like that was the most simple line to follow, is like, okay, so I need some love. What can I do? I need some connection. What can I do? And that just seemed to be the easiest route for me, which is kind of sad, really. But that was just what life was like at that point. And my mum, I'm a very hard worker. She is a very hard worker, but she's always worked long hours. She worked away a lot. And so I got away with a lot, to be honest. And I think, like there's pros and cons to that freedom as a child, but probably what I needed was support prior to that freedom in order to be able to, look for what I needed in my life without it being something that could have had really bad consequences. And I'm very lucky that I didn't have any serious negative consequences. I think the worst thing that happened was that I lost my license for drink driving when I was 17. And that has been slightly annoying because becoming a citizen of Australia, I had to bring that up and they were like, that's a criminal conviction. I'm like, oh, for real? When I was 17, 20 years ago. But I mean, I still became a citizen. So,
Yeah, it's interesting how those little life paths take you to
mhm,
unexpected routes along the way. But just going back to what you said about understanding the different perspectives that life has, and then looking at what you said about there are the shoulds and should nots, and what's
mhm,
socially normal and socially acceptable. And I try to eliminate the word should from my vocabulary as much as possible because for that very reason, and even in policing, I used to take the or try to take the bigger picture possible because when I look at like what you were going through and I compare that with, for example, the front line of policing, is that it's the band-aid fix, it's the surface
mhm,
issue that you're dealing with in the here and now, but there's no look at the bigger picture of what's going on, what socially has happened, what environmentally has happened, what like relationship connections have brought us here. And this is all without anybody who's got ADHD. So you add that on top, and there is like a myriad of like, it's like opening that Pandora's box. It's like, where do you start? Because there is so much to unpack. And I
yeah,
think that's for anybody out there to
mhm.
just almost take a pause and go, what, why, how, and almost reflect on those questions about our whole lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the most powerful things you can do, no matter what life has served you. I've married a husband who has the quote unquote, perfect childhood. And parents stayed together, raised in one home. They still have that home. Like, it ticked all the boxes. But then there are other issues that come with that, that when you unpack the what, the why, the how, all of these things, why am I this way? Or why am I that way? Or why do I respond or react like this? When you can have that understanding of yourself, the self-awareness can give you so much power. And I think it's one of the things I'm grateful for, in that I had such difficulty living my life just in general, that it gave me so much to learn that now leads me into being a super powerful human being because of the things that I've learned from having that perspective. But it's not easy to do. And it doesn't end either, like it's ongoing. We're going to be on this journey, well, forever, really. And I don't know if you saw my post the other day that I'm actually on Operation Live Forever at the moment, because there's technology coming out about how, we're, as the world progresses technologically wise, we're going to be able to live longer and longer and longer. And I want that to be an opportunity for learning and growth consistently beyond what has ever been possible before. And so perspective is huge in that.
Yeah, and in saying that, like even that with perspective and talking about your relationship with your husband, and then obviously you're the mum of two young girls, how was coming out of your adulthood and everything that you dealt with in that to meeting somebody, starting a family? You're still undiagnosed at this point in time. So how were things then? Like what was going on? I mean, this is still before you wrote your first book. So like what
Mhm.
was life like in that early period of okay, I'm supposed to be an adult now and I'm supposed to be mature now, like what was actually going on for you in that time?
I was a teacher, and so I was a primary school teacher. That's how I met my husband. And he's a teacher as well. He's now a principal of a school. And he saw me at my very worst when we very first started to get together. He knew me professionally, and then we got to know each other as friends. And I had a car accident when we'd very first started dating. And my sister and my dad got in touch, and they were awful to me. I hadn't spoken to them in 15 years. And my sister told me that she wished that I was dead, that I'd died in that car accident. Now, I mean, she would have been, she's younger than me. she doesn't even remember saying that. We're reconnected. Everything is fine now. And she was wounded too. But at that point in time, shit really hit the fan for me. I wasn't on medication for anxiety yet, but I went on medication and yeah, I had this big blowout with family. And I left the country. I went back to New Zealand for a couple of weeks. My mum looked after me and I didn't want to come back to Australia. I was like, no, I can't do it. I need to be here. You need to look after me. My mum did something really good in that moment. She was like, you're getting back on that plane, you're going, and you're going to be fine. And it's a good thing that she did because even though I'm sure in that moment she was torn, but she knew that my life was better here. And so I got back on the plane. I came back and, my now husband had seen me like in an absolute ball of mess. I came back and I started playing sport. I've never played sport. Like I was the white kid at school with all of the Maoris and Islanders. So I never got the ball like that. You've seen them play, right? It's just like they're natural. So I never got the ball, but I was like, I'm going to play sport. So I had community. I started playing hockey because that's a, country Western Australian game to play if you're a woman is hockey. So I might start playing hockey. There was a bit of drinking involved with that. So that became a little bit of a problem, but the community, the exercise, and my then boyfriend, I started to build more of a foundation, a healthy foundation, rather than a negative foundation. And things were still not perfect, that's for sure. Like I was on that anxiety medication for quite a while, and I was still drinking a lot, but I was coping a lot better. I did need sleeping pills occasionally, which I'm really, to be quite honest, quite pissed off that doctors gave me in my early 20s because I don't think they should have ever given me that level of sleeping pill at that age. But anyway, that's what they did. And so I mean, things were okay, but it was like that surface level stuff, like yes, I had the community and I was doing some exercise and I had a great partner, had a good job as a teacher, but it was still, there was cracks and I didn't really realize what they were until we got married and I was pregnant for the first time with my oldest daughter. And then things got really bad because I wasn't medicated. I felt isolated because we were in the country town anymore. We were back in the city. Isn't it funny how you can feel more isolated in a city where there's more people?
I totally get that.
People don't smile and say hello in the city. When you're out like in the country, you go to the shops and you bump into 5 people and people in the country complain about it, but then when you don't have it, you feel so lonely. So it's like this.
I can totally relate. I live in a small country town at the moment, and that's totally true for me. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, while I was coping on the surface at that point in my life, there were a lot of cracks under the surface, and there was still a lot of work that I needed to do. And that was, I felt like I was doing the work. We got as part of the Department of Education, 6 counselling sessions a year. So I was utilising those. Like I said, I had these CDs that I was listening to for meditation, and I was ticking those boxes and things were okay. But then once I got pregnant, yeah, it was not okay. And I went through a period of suicidal ideation when I was pregnant with my eldest. And I didn't tell people. Like I just did not, because I was like, people are going to think I'm crazy because I'm growing my baby. And like, what an awful person to have those thoughts when you're pregnant. I was Googling how I could do that without hurting my baby, and there was no way that I could guarantee it. And that was the only reason that I didn't go through with it, was because I was like, well, something will happen to her and I can't do that. And yeah, I didn't tell anyone until I was 3 months postpartum about that. I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my best friend, I didn't tell my doctor. I did go to the doctor at that point and I said, I think I need to go back on anxiety medication, but I didn't want to tell him the extent of it because I was so afraid of being, I don't know, taken away and then still being alive but without my baby, or all of these crazy stories going through my head. And yeah, it was one of the hardest times ever, was being pregnant. And so it did take me a while to go, maybe I want to do that again, because it was like, I want to have two children, but do I want to go through that period again? And I had to wait until I'd put support systems in place to be able to do that again.
Look, I just want to acknowledge your like raw vulnerability in sharing that because I know for many women out there who go through pregnancy, it's not an easy ride. And for
Mm.
you to then have to deal with the mental health side of things, but deal with it on your own. Like you said, you'd moved back to the city, so you felt isolated already from your usual routine of being in the country. Now you're pregnant and having these thoughts, and you don't want to tell anybody. So you're even further isolated from your support network. And
Mm.
having to go through all of that and be pregnant is just, that's a journey in itself. Like, that's a whole story you could unpack in itself. So, the fact that you made it through, the fact that you went on again to have another daughter, and that you created this new family, like kudos to you.
Yeah. And I mean, I do often think about like the journey that I went on with becoming a mother, and I wasn't ready. It's interesting because we kind of like
Are we ever
let's
though?
see what. Well, we were planning it, but we were like we got pregnant very quickly, and obviously like grateful for that. But because I'd been on the pill for such a long time, I thought it might take a few years. So we'll go off the pill and we'll see what happens. And we were pregnant straight away. I had never held a newborn before holding my own. And it was really scary. I had no fucking idea what to do. And yes, no one has any idea what to do, but I can tell you right now, my kids already know more about babies than what I did. I didn't even know there was a placenta when I was pregnant. Like, so I found out a few weeks before going into labor that I was going to be birthing a placenta after the baby. I didn't even know. I had no idea. And which is really interesting for someone who was so incredibly sexually active as a teenager. I just had no idea, right? Just making decisions without thinking about anything. And she was born in winter. And honestly, putting those fucking onesies on a baby is so hard. So we just cranked the heating. I was like, I can't get this onesie on this thing. So we just like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I say to her now, she's almost 10, like, you didn't know what you were doing when you came into this world. I didn't know what I was doing when you came into this world. We figured it out together. So we can figure out anything together because we've literally figured out some of the hardest things together. And I think like we have the most amazing connection because of that. And I think she's super cool and like so wise beyond her years. But it was, my gosh, like the biggest learning curve. And then birthing a baby and being in this place where I didn't really have any friends, I was like, what is this? And we had to figure that out. And we did. So it wasn't easy, but it was worth it.
100% word that I think we never understand what we're going to go through when we become parents, but it is one of the greatest gifts that we can ever be given. So I love that connection that you have with your daughter, and we never understand what we're going to go through with parents. And I think the fact that you said she came into this world not knowing, you had no idea what you're doing now, you can do everything together because you learn together. Is that part of your life, like obviously becoming a parent and what you went through with that? Is that what you had you write your book?
What I wrote my book about was definitely partly that, but a big part of it was my own healing journey, completely selfishly, because I've realized over, I guess, probably the last 6 or 7 years, starting to kind of come out the other side of a dark mental health kind of roller coaster, that writing things down and talking about them helps you to overcome it. And I do that with my daughter too. One of the things that came about when she was a baby was, as we all do as mothers, look in the mirror and you go, oh my God, like my body's not what it used to be. We have that moment. But I was holding her and thinking the thought about how much I didn't like my body. And as I was looking in the mirror, I also saw her. And I thought, hold on, this message is going to go through to her. What messages do I want her to take on in life? And it's not just about me. having that healing. It's about my children, and it's about other people who can also benefit from that, and benefit from, listening and going, well, if she can talk about that and if she can share that, then maybe I can, and maybe it's safe, and maybe it doesn't need to be so scary, even though it absolutely is. Like writing that book, I think I sat at my kitchen bench crying every single time I was writing, because so many things came up. You forget about things. You're like, oh my gosh, yes, and that happened. And oh my gosh, of course I felt that way about that particular person, because this is, what happened in my childhood. Or, you start to make all these incredible connections, and you just have a better understanding of yourself. But writing the book was, yeah, partly going, okay, this is my story. I hope people can learn from it. I hope my children can learn from it one day. And I hope that I'm setting them up for success. But it was also that healing space for me to write it down and to own it, because there was shame too, right? Like I think about some of the things that I've talked about today, and a lot of people would feel shame for those. Actually, almost everything that I've shared, like people, there's shame, there's stigma around certain conversations, and I don't think there needs to be, but at the same time, there's lessons in that shame. Like if you've felt that, then you go, oh, well, okay, why is that coming up for me? And is that me? Or is it just a projection from, society? Or is it a story I've told myself? Or most of the time it's got to do with something outside of us that creates that feeling of shame, because we're worried about what people will think, or we think there's something wrong with us, and that's why that thing happened. And most of the time when you actually dig under the surface, that's not the case at all. It's a circumstance that was completely out of your control, or your response was due to the fact that you had limited resources at that point in time. And that was what you, like kids, they do things all the time that you think, what the hell are you doing? But the reality is they're just literally doing what they need to get what they think they need in that time, in whatever way is the easiest way to get that thing. And understanding that also, I think, hopefully makes me a better parent as well.
And yeah, like you said, we can only try our best. And you're right, though, one of the things that so many people go through is this shame and guilt and judgment of themselves, of what they've experienced, what they've done, how they've coped. And yet that's all they had in that moment. And even when I'm coaching clients, it's one of the hardest things that I have to get people to do, because I sit there going, as your coach, there is no shame, guilt, judgment. Like there's nothing there for me. But when they're telling you part of their story and they're trying to overcome certain things, it's a big part of what holds people back, because
Mhm.
there is so much stigma around what is normal and what you should and shouldn't do, like we've already discussed, that people can't just be themselves and own that, like you said, this is what I could do with the resources I had at the time. This is what happened. And that's how life turned out. But it's also part of our big life journey. It's the lessons we learn along the way. And at the end of the day, it's not how many times we fall or make mistakes, it's how many times we get up and keep going.
Yeah, yeah. I think it, the most important thing that I learnt along the way around understanding the shoulds and the shouldn'ts is that none of it is actually a reality. Like none of those thoughts are real. No thoughts are real, actually. Like, and that was really early on. There was a meditation that I used to do where it was like clouds, that your thoughts were clouds, and they would come in and then they would go out the other side, and they'd disappear, and they're not actually real. But that was the biggest understanding that changed everything for me, was knowing that thoughts are not reality. And that's why I was able to, when having suicidal thoughts, not go through with it, because it didn't have to be my reality. And I remember a friend of mine a couple of years ago now messaged me just to say, I don't want to alarm you, but I'm having suicidal thoughts. I'm not planning on doing anything, da 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 da. And, we talked about it. And I said, I'm not freaking out. Don't worry. I'm worried about you, but I'm not worried about that, because you've told me. And the thing is, if we can tell everyone, and if everyone can just know that if you have thoughts like that or other thoughts that are sending you down a spiral, if we can separate those thoughts from reality and just see them as words floating through our head and be like, that's an interesting thought, it can completely change your attachment to that thought and the outcome of that thought. Because if you attach yourself to that thought and then you go down a rabbit hole and you end up taking action on whatever that thought is, that's when it's a problem. But when you know that thoughts are not reality, it allows you to go, okay, those are interesting. And the shoulds and the shouldn'ts have come from our reality being skewed around us by different, societal news or people in our neighborhood or our parents or our peers. That's kind of what's been the narrative that we've been fed, that we've decided is the reality. But the truth is not that. The truth is whatever we decide is the truth, and whatever we choose to focus on. Not that that's easy. None of that is actually easy, because those thoughts still happen and they still freaking suck. And I do still have thoughts like that sometimes. Like, maybe it would just be easier if I wasn't here. But I never put energy on those thoughts like, oh my gosh, I'm having those thoughts. Oh, there's something wrong with me. And like, it doesn't spiral into that anymore, because I'm like, interesting. I'm having a moment, clearly. What do I need to support myself to go, okay, right now I'm clearly feeling really overwhelmed with everything in life. What can I take off my plate? Or what can I ask for someone to do to help me? How can I seek support right now? Because if I'm having that thought, that means I need to seek support. And so that's like the trigger. It's not the, oh my God, what's happening? I'm going crazy. I need more medication. It's a, okay, having that thought, needs support. That's the process. But it only got to that point because I realized that thoughts aren't reality, because they're usually something that someone's projected onto us, or usually something that we've just decided to, take that extra step further and go down the rabbit hole with, when we don't need to.
Yeah, totally agree. And like the thing that came to mind when you were saying that, and I love that a thought needs support, because the other quote that I often like say to myself, which I heard years ago, and I think my sister uses it all the time, is where your attention goes, energy flows.
Energy
And if
flows.
you give that negative thought energy, then
Mm-hmm.
it's going to come, you're going to bring that thought into reality, because that's where
Mm-hmm.
all your energy is going. But if you can just say, like, oh, that's a thought, that's interesting, and let it go, and then a positive thought comes into your mind and your attention goes that way, then all your energy is now shifted in a completely different direction. And I think it's one thing that we need to be mindful of in everyday life, because we all have those positive and negative thoughts flow through our mind in any given day, is
Mm-hmm.
that we just need to pause for a moment and go, yes, that thought isn't reality. Where is my attention going to go? Do I give it any energy, or do I just wait for that next thought to come along? And that's prevalent whether you're dealing with everyday life, whether you're dealing with trauma, whether you're dealing with
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or stress or parenting. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
just there for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even my 7-year-old, the other day, she must have seen something scary. I don't know, somewhere. She's sensitive. So it could have just been a G-rated movie and something somewhat scary happened. And she's like, I can't stop thinking about this thing. And I was able to say to her, okay, can I show you something that I do when I have those moments where I can't stop thinking about something? Because that is the problem. We get stuck in our thoughts, right? And so if you do have a negative thought and then you go, oh my God, and then you spiral, it's like, what do I do? And the most simple thing, and I remember doing this when I was pregnant, I was at the comedy and I started having a freaking anxiety attack at the comedy. I wasn't even in the front row. Like, why did I have an anxiety attack? Anyway, whatever. And it was just simply to notice the things around you and name them. Like I can say ring light, computer, lip balm, phone, cup, and then label all the colors: gold, blue, gray, red, orange, and just repeat, repeat, repeat. And it just takes your focus into the present moment, and it gives you something to focus on as well. And so I'm teaching her that. And then the day after, she's sitting with her friend and telling her, she's like, her friend hurt herself. And she's like, what I want you to do is start focusing on the things. Can you tell me what's that over there? Just name it. Just name it out loud. Or you can do it in your head. And it was so cute to watch, right? Like I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, blessed. I love this moment. But there's so many quick and easy strategies to help you. I'm not going to say reverse your thoughts because you can't reverse things, but can help you switch in that moment. And it's not, I mean, it's not a long-term solution, because if you are having consistent, heavy, dark thoughts, then there's more work that needs to be done. But even just to get to the point to do that deeper work, you've got to have some of those band-aid solutions. It was like with medication for anxiety and depression. For me, it was like, I do not have the capacity to do the work that I need to do until I've had the medication. And then you get to a baseline level that you can then start to do some of that work. And then you can come out and off the medication, which was actually one of the hardest things I've ever done, was coming off SSRIs. Like, it was awful. And I almost wish that I'd found a different way, but that was just what I found at that time. So those little things can help hugely, as long as you are prepared then to do some of that deeper work as well.
And such a simple thing for, like, as you said, like a simple trick that you can do in the here and now. And the fact that you can pass that on to that next generation, and that they then start to heal themselves quicker in the moments because they're learning the tools that we wish we had have been given back when we were those ages. Like, I'm a few years older than you, and I'm looking back on all the things that I've probably taught my children and wish I could have been taught the same thing. But you only know what to work with the resources that you've been given. And I do something similar, like you said, in that moment of like the senses, like what can you see, what can you hear, what can you smell, what can you touch, all those types of things. It's one of the things that I do to bring myself out of the moment, if I'm having a triggering attack of, trauma that comes back. So, but you're right, all those little things allow you to get to that baseline so that you can start to do the other self-awareness, personal development style work. Brings me to the next part of your journey, having now been diagnosed with ADHD, and the 2.5 years that you've been on this new journey. Like, how has that now shaped your life moving forward?
I think it's just changed some of the strategies and understanding about why certain things were hard. So when you better understand why you are the way you are, which is all self-inquiry, whether it's ADHD or not, you're able to be a little bit kinder to yourself when you respond in a certain way. So I know now, like, for example, I can be very irritable if someone interrupts me during hyperfocus. And so I will snap, and then I'll be like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I can't believe I snapped at someone. Like, I'll be like, just leave me alone. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. And I feel really bad. Now, I'm not saying that that reaction is an appropriate reaction, but if I beat myself up about it, I continue to react badly because you get defensive, right? And so for me, it's like, okay, I recognize the reason that I've reacted like that is because someone interrupted my hyperfocus, which is really important for me. And so I need to have those conversations to sit up and say, hey, I'm in a hyperfocus right now. Can it wait? Or like just kind of framing it in a better way. Or if I do react negatively, going, okay, I reacted negatively. There's a reason for that. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason. And can I apologize and not be defensive, and then explain, hey, this is what I need right now? Because before I was like, no, I just need to breathe. I just need to think differently. I had all of these anxiety related techniques that I thought I shouldn't be quick to anger anymore. But the reality is, my body reacts before anything else sometimes. And I see that in my kids too. And I see it in everyday humans. But the more we beat ourselves up about it, the worse we actually react, because we're just feeling like crap about ourselves. So of course we're going to react from a different place. So that's probably one of the first major things. And the second thing has been the way that I work. And I work for myself. So obviously that is amazing, thank goodness, because there's no wonder that I've ended up working for myself, because working in the structure of a school as a school teacher, it's so funny that I became a teacher. Like, how did that happen? It clearly didn't last very long. But the fact that I had to be in this specific routine and there was no flexibility about it. Now I get to work in a way that I'm flexible, and I've started to look at a whole lot of ways that my energy works due to ADHD and work with that rather than against it, rather than being like, oh my God, why can't I just work a normal 8 hour day like everyone? Why can't I just sit down and get it done? I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking, okay, so the best way I work is in short blocks, taking a quick movement break and then coming back, getting myself a standing desk, getting myself a walking pad, like all of these things that then support my energy to work how I want to work. I work really well in sprints, and then I need like downtime because I'm like, oh my God, I'm dead and I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to move. And then I'm like up and I'm going again. And in most roles, that would be a problem because you can't be dead for a few days. You've got to be like active every day, consistent. And so I've just learned to work better with my energy, and it just gives me so much more freedom and flexibility and less of that fear of what other people think, because I'm doing things in a way that feel really conducive to me, and it's been successful in my own right, like my own way of thinking about it. If other people see it as success or not, whatever, they might think that I should be in a job, whatever. Like that's not what works for me. And I've been able to let go of those shoulds, and see those as just those thoughts going through the mind of like, I should or I shouldn't. Oh, well, really? Where does that come from? That's not me. So, yeah, I hope
I
that
love
answers
that.
your
And I
question.
love that you've been able to say, this is my life on my terms, and I get to do things my way. What works for me, what works for my body, what works for my life, to then be able to go and have the best life. So, did that then lead to your latest book, that was a huge collaboration with a bunch of other incredible women?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the thing with ADHD is that I have so many ideas. I have a lot of ideas, and I have so many things that I want to talk about and want to write about, and people I want to connect with. And so the book Try and Stop Her came about as I guess, a combination of all of those things. I love connecting with people, and as a woman in business, I wanted to support other women in business to also become authors. And I thought, I wonder if I could do one of those collaborative books that, there's been a few of them that have come out over I guess, the last decade. Actually, Chicken Soup for the Soul was one of the first collaborative books, and I've got that one, but I've also got Chicken Soup for the Dog Lover's Soul. I don't know if you know, like they've got the different versions of those
They
books.
do have the different versions. I've got a couple myself.
Yeah, and so I mean they were the OG collaborative books, and they're just a really nice way to sit down and just read a chapter and get some inspiration or just feel good. And so for me, it was kind of like a dopamine hit, to be honest, a 6 months long dopamine hit of me being a part of this process and helping women to really own their stories, just like we're doing here on your podcast, is talking about your story, own your story. It really, even though it's a book about businesswomen, it's a personal development book because it's about how women have overcome adversities of varying kinds, so many different kinds of adversities. And some of them I'd known for a few years and I didn't really know their stories, and then they shared them and it was just like mind blowing. So that's where that book came from. And I think it's with ADHD, I'm always looking for something new and exciting, and which is it could be a curse, but at the same time I choose for it to be a blessing, and I can see different ideas and make them come to life really quickly if I'm excited about it, which is what I did with that. And it's also how I've ended up working in AI, because AI is constantly changing. There's always new things. So for me, that's freaking amazing because I'm like, oh my God, there's this new tool and I get to play with it. And so that is exciting for me. Whereas a lot of people, that's like, oh my God, like there's more tools and it's just like, ugh. Whereas I get really excited by that. So instead of going, oh, I used to think I was that person. Well, I am that person that constantly chops and changes. And why can't I just stick to one thing and, like just stay in one lane? And I'm like across 500 lanes at once. And, maybe I'd just be more successful if I just did this. But the reality is that's not how my brain works. And so having ideas like that book and, you know, other ideas that I've had, which there are millions, it just excites me. And then I get to bring other people along for the ride.
I love that. And I think it's such an incredible thing to do is to take an idea that you have that then goes on to empower others, not only in the creation of it, like all the stories that you brought together, but then the people who read it to learn something from it as well. So I love that you've taken what a lot of people would see as a negative or an issue, such as having ADHD and being diagnosed later in life, is like, oh my God, now I have to deal with this on top of the rest of my life. You've actually kind of said, okay, cool, I have this thing, it explains my life, and now how am I going to create the best life for me, my family, and others moving forward inside of that? I think that's just incredible.
And I think one of the things you mentioned there that, well, I mean, it triggered a thought in my head. I don't even know if you mentioned it, but it triggered the thought. So funny how my brain works sometimes, is because there was other people involved, there was a sense of responsibility for me and accountability. And I need that. I work on my own, right? So if no one is making me accountable, I don't necessarily get things done. And so for me, that was, I was helping others, but it was also they were helping me because they were expecting a book at the end of it. There was a contract. It was like, right, at this point, there's going to be a book. And so that took me out of task paralysis, which can very much, like I get procrastination, like ridiculous procrastination for some of the most stupid things. Sometimes they might take 2 minutes and it takes me 3.5 years to do it. But when I've got other people that are keeping me accountable, I find it like that social accountability is huge. And I think it's also why I enjoy social media so much, because I find that for me, there is an element of, you know, I've had to overcome the comparisonitis that comes with social media, but social media is also a really powerful accountability tool. That's how my first book came out, because I said, this year, my first book is coming out. It'll be out by the end of the year. It came out on the 27th of December. So I was like, and if I say I'm going to do something, I'm like, I am doing it, but I will absolutely leave it till the last minute, but it will still be amazing because I can get 4 months worth of work done in 4 days when I'm focused. So, and when other people are relying on me. So I set myself up in that way. I'm like, how can I make other people be reliant on me? And then I know it's going to happen.
I love that. And I will drop links to your social media and both your books into the show notes so people can access that, because I think it'd be totally worth it for all my listeners. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today, having this raw, real, and vulnerable story shared with everybody, and just being totally you and owning who you are and what you do in life.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me and creating a space for these conversations, because that's what we need more of, is the space for those conversations and for people to tune in and feel less alone and like it's okay to share their story.
Thank you. And that's the main reason the podcast exists for me, is to be a storyteller and to share people's stories, because we all have one. We just need the courage to bring it to light. Yeah. And I always like to finish every podcast with asking, what are you most grateful for today?
What I'm most grateful for today is actually being alive at this point in time in 2025. I feel like, I mean, I've mentioned that I'm big into AI, and I feel like the changes that are going to be happening in our world in the near future are going to be interesting. I'll say that, interesting. And I'm just grateful to be around for that, because I love witnessing and observing. And I'm just think it's cool to be alive at this point. I think there's a lot of people thinking that right now is an awful time to be alive, and there's so many bad things happening in the world because that's what we're focusing on. But actually there's some really cool things happening and so much positive possibility.
Thank you for tuning in to the Everyday Warriors podcast. If you have an idea for a future episode or a story you'd like to share yourself, then please reach out and message me, as I am always up for real, raw, and authentic conversations with other everyday warriors. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can download all the latest episodes as they are published. And spread the word to your family and friends and colleagues so they can listen in too. If you're sharing on social media, please be sure to tag me so that I can personally acknowledge you. I'm always open to comment about how these episodes have resonated with you, the listener. And remember, lead with love as you live this one wild and precious life.